Cell phone off?
Volume is.
We're good. Okay, good evening, everyone. We're going to have some variations off of the agenda this evening. The first item up, it was our anticipated police annual report. Chief Scharschmidt's going to fill us in where we're at with that. Chief, you want to fill council in?
Yeah, I mentioned March 1st was our hopeful date to have the annual report to you. Unfortunately, we had some CAD issues, which is our records management system, our RMS. So without accurate numbers, obviously, there's no point in doing the report. So it should be done here in the next week or two. That's the goal, and I'm going to send that to you. I would respectfully ask that you review it. If you have any questions, please let me know. Remember that the 2020 numbers are going to be a bit off from years in the past because of COVID, so take that into account. But I should have that to you, like I said, within the next week or two. Sergeant Luzniak, he works on our annual report, puts a lot of time and effort into it. He's also doing body cams right now, which Governor DeWine just released a statement, $10 million to the state for body cams. So we're doing some research right now, and he also just recently we put out for laterals and new hires, so he was behind that as well. So a lot of other ancillary duties that the sergeants do, like Sergeant Zach, so should have that to you fairly soon. I appreciate your patience. Thank you.
Councilman?
Chief, I did have one question. You said you had some trouble with the CAD system. Did you lose data, or is it just a matter of compiling?
We didn't lose data.
Okay.
It was just a matter of some CAD issues we
Okay.
ran into at times. We've got it all worked out.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Chief, let us know. We'll put it back on the Mayor's Caucus, and then we'll move forward. So I anticipated this taking a little bit longer. That's why we had scheduled you at 6 o'clock. So what I asked the chief to do, though, is I know my office has received quite a few phone calls, as well as the clerk of council's office, regarding this feral cats issue. So what I asked the chief, if he wouldn't mind addressing it along with our animal control officer, Miranda, bring you up to speed with where we're at, what they have done, and also, probably most important, is the response we've gotten back from some of the, not only residents, but from PETA, and also working with the city of Brooklyn. So Chief, either you or Miranda want to fill council in where we're at?
Yeah, I'm going to turn it over to Miranda. I mean, she can explain it better than I have. Talked to Council President Gallo, and I think this is important from my end because I know as of last Friday you got an email from another person, so you may continue to receive emails. So I think it's just best when we had this open time slot to address this issue. So with that, Miranda?
Yeah, so I'm just going to start this all from the beginning. So I've been in Brooklyn and Parma Heights for 4 years now. Since I got hired here, the pretty much standard practice for tracking feral cats is euthanizing them. Other cities that I've worked for and worked with, that's what we do. When I do track the feral cats, it's something that the residents request me to do because they have nuisance cats on their property. Whether the cat be defecating on their property, destroying their property, the residents want the cats removed. If I do pick up a cat that's TNR being already fixed, I do try to find someone to take it, but because they're feral cats, resources for someone to impound them is extremely limited. So we haven't found anyone to take them, so we euthanize them. Every year I make a post on our Facebook page advising residents that my feral cat traps are open. My reason for doing that is we do have some residents that have indoor-outdoor cats, even though they didn't. And our shelter is very small, so I don't want to impound people's pets if I don't have to. So I make that post just letting people know, like, hey, we're opening our cats and everything. So this year when I made the post, someone screenshotted it and posted it to the cat owners group, and it just completely went like viral, and a lot of people were upset. And then there was a cat rescue in Ashtabula where someone made a TikTok about me saying that I was rounding up residents' cats and killing them, and then that group of people got very upset with me. But I've been doing it for 4 years. I've euthanized 25 cats. Most of them were sick or injured. I would say maybe 10 were from traps. So it's not something that we do frequently, but unfortunately when I do get these complaints, I don't have anywhere else to take the ferals, which is why that's what we do.
So we put the post up initially to advise residents. Somehow this came out as a roundup. This is far from a roundup. This is a resident complaining of feral cat issues for whatever reason, using their sandbox, the kids can't play in it, yard as a restroom, whatever the case may be with the feral cat. but somehow this group in Ashtabula County really got rolling with them. And we didn't remove the post right away. We offered a rebuttal, Chief Milky and I, and then we had Fox 8 call, we had Channel 3 call. And Miranda didn't do an interview with them, we just released a statement. They did do, I don't know if you saw the articles, but they did do stories on this. And then ultimately on a Saturday, I think it was 9 days ago, they did a protest. There were 6 people, which they said they would bring hundreds of people. But what we did is we called many of these people, Miranda and I called many of these people back, and we asked, does Sarah Maddox, who runs this
The cat rescue.
cat rescue, can you help us? Can you come here and pick up our ferals and we won't euthanize them? Well, there's no solutions. They just don't like how we do business, but they've not offered any solutions. So then the latest email that you received on Friday was from Jennifer Dale, and she's not a resident. A lot of our residents were on Facebook commenting, why are Ashtabula residents worried about how we do business? So we ran into that. So ultimately what we did is we suspended the program until Chief Milky and I can have some further discussion how we move forward. That's where we're at. Do you want to share with them, you talked to Mayor Gallagher about this?
Yeah, I did speak with Mayor Gallagher about it. She supports it. She, obviously, the public backlash is not something we foresaw. You know, we didn't think that was going to happen, obviously. So their mindset is kind of us just continuing to do it, just not making it a public thing when we do it. So that's kind of where Brooklyn is with it.
Council have any questions for the chief or for the ACO?
I just wanted to
Yes,
ask for a little clarification. The group from Ashtabula, they reached out, but yet offered no solution?
No,
They wouldn't take the cats?
No, none of these cat rescue groups or cat enthusiasts have offered to any solution to take the cats. They just don't want us to euthanize them.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So there's no phone number for this cat rescue. The gal name is Sarah Maddox. So I had Miranda send her a Facebook message. We'd like to have a conversation with you. Maybe you can help us. But unless we have a conversation, you just bashing us isn't helping the situation. And she had Facebook messaged back and said, I want to record this. No problem. Let's talk. Never call. That's the issue.
Okay.
And everyone that we did speak to, they just referred us to her because it's all, I think we had one of our residents who just asked how we do business and we explained. And I will say it's Miranda's worst day when she has to euthanize a cat. I'm a big animal guy. But unfortunately, that is how we do business. No one will accept that. And we did get a letter from PETA, which I'm going to have Miranda hand out to each of you. I don't know if you did receive the email, but it's a good read as far as PETA's position supporting us and Miranda. Do you want to hand
Yeah,
this out?
sure.
Chief, while Miranda's handing that out, could you or Miranda also address one other item? That's the CNR option, catch, neuter, and return.
Yeah, I can actually speak on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So TNR is trap, neuter,
Or
return.
trap.
That's when you catch the cats, you fix them, and then you
Thank you.
release them back from where they were found. The issue with that is that's not what residents are requesting. They want the cats gone.
Thank you.
So if that's the solution that I offer when people call me asking the cats to be removed, that doesn't satisfy them. They don't want the cats on their property. They don't want them fixed and brought back. They want them gone.
I look at TNR how PETA does. I mean, you're not solving the problem. And I think reading this would, I strongly agree with the position PETA has with TNR and putting the feral cats back in the community.
Any other questions for the chief or Miranda regarding feral cats at this time?
I have none.
Okay.
All good?
Good.
Very good. We will move on then to, on the agenda, it's item 2. That's a nuisance ordinance that Sergeant Zach, it's this mask Sergeant Zach has been working extensively on. She's worked on this for some time, put a lot of time and devotion, dedication into it. So Sergeant, would you like to address what the nuisance ordinance is?
I'm certain that you all received a copy of the ordinance itself. So I actually wrote the ordinance in 2009, and it was addressing some specific issues from renters at the time that we could not get landlords to hold their tenants accountable. And it kind of got tabled for quite a bit of time until, in the last few years, we had not just landlords and tenants, we had a couple of businesses where we had some issues, and homeowners who have been making life miserable, basically, for the people around them, and it's unfair. And the ultimate goal, I'm going to pull this down because otherwise I fog up so fast, it's not funny. The ultimate goal is obviously to maintain the current condition that people want to live in, which is a calm environment. And most of the time, if there's complaints, it's about something like fireworks. And I'll give you an example. There's a few houses on Brandywine that we've had continuous complaints from the residents on Caucus that abut them that say, you know, they're constantly blowing off fireworks, their music is so loud, and it's, you know, and it's not nice language in the music that they can't even entertain in their own backyard. And on the abutting street, there are 3 rentals right next to each other, and then a home, an actual residence that's owned by the person who lives in it. And when we get there, they have been listening to a scanner. So whenever they would call to complain, as we arrived, they would see us coming up the street, put everything away, we can't do anything to help them. And it's very frustrating for the residents. And it's become so disconcerting that we try to maneuver around that. Have dispatch call, you know, the OIC on the phone, we will dispatch them from here, and then we're coming around a different direction, we're walking through people's backyards. There has to be other solutions for us as well. So the nuisance abatement ordinance was written as an option. It's a tool in our toolbox. And it's not one that would be used frequently, but when we do need it, we really do need it. So if we have it in place and there's checks and balances in it, and then a review, you know, by, you know, the zoning board, in case there is a, you know, final action for somebody to take a look at it. So it's not just us making a complaint. The letter comes from the chief's office after, you know, we've had some serious nuisance abatement issues at that residence or business, or, you know, through the owner or the landlord. And then we follow it from there, so that there is a fine, some sort of monetary thing that is, you know, charged to them at a minimum of 2 hours for as many officers as it takes to go there all the time. So if I have 2, and it's a minimum of 2 hours, then they're gonna start paying whatever we have to pay out for our officers to be there. And then there's recourse if they don't pay that, then it becomes a criminal thing. But prior to that, it's a civil action. So we wanted to make certain that we had this in place and that we didn't punish any victims. So one of the things that you'll notice is that we have made certain to write in there that nothing having to do with domestic violence would be considered, you know, we could use for a nuisance abatement. I don't want a victim not calling us because of that. You know, we need to have some protections in place for them as well. So if you have any questions about it, I'm happy to answer it.
Councilman?
I have a question for Mr. Picorni. Mr. Picorni, does this put the city in any position that the city is responsible for litigation from any fines that we impose on them?
Well, we did, Sergeant Zach and the chief and I did some pretty extensive research on this. Sergeant Zach prepared a list of cities that have a nuisance ordinance similar to this. And I'm going around about in your
That's
question.
fine. That's fine.
The memo attached to the package you have says that in addition, we looked at ordinances from Bedford, Brooklyn, Brook Park, Cleveland Heights, Euclid, Garfield Heights, Fairview Park, North Olmsted, Parma, and South Euclid. We cross-checked them against our text. So the point of that is other cities have this. I don't, you know, we have insurance carrier that we have, you know, public official liability coverage if there's an issue with, as you suggest. We checked a little bit. We really haven't heard that there's been any issues in other cities with litigation based on a call like this. But we made sure that when we reviewed the other cities' ordinances, they were all replete with as Sergeant Zach referred to, a right of appeal. And it's pretty defined in the proposed ordinance here, but the body that would review an appeal of this type of action is that we've designated as a Board of Zoning Appeals. since this really revolves around residents and housing. And so we think we've got enough safeguard in here for due process if someone really has a complaint before it would rise to the level of perhaps what
Right.
you're asking about.
Okay. Then I do have a question for Sergeant Zach. You had mentioned that there's also some businesses that you'd be able to utilize this ordinance against or to try and rein them in, so to speak. Are other cities, and I guess this goes to both of you, Mr. Picorni, do other cities also use this for businesses that are making other residents' lives?
Miserable? Yeah.
I was looking for something softer, but
The-
I'll go with what you're going
The
with.
actual original ordinance, the nuisance abatement ordinance, was about businesses. And that's where they really originated for multiple cities. And then added landlord, tenants, and owners of properties. So it has been used in that capacity, and I could see it as a possibility, but as I said, it's really the last tool in the toolbox.
Right.
You know, we'd rather take enforcement action as we see fit first and mediate through things, which is what we 90% of the time have been able to do. But there's that last 10% we'd like to be able to at least have another
Sure.
option with.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
If businesses illegal access, we can't make a criminal case, this is nice to fall back on. Many cities have this in place. And the time to do it is now, where there's not something that we're thinking right now, other than Brandywine. That's something
Right.
where you got
Understood.
duplexes and tenants that we can keep in check, but you can't point to anything specifically, and it won't be something we use regularly, but certainly, as Sergeant Zach said, it's nice to have it in our toolbox if needed.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman?
Yeah, I have, if we have, let's use chapter 618, why can't we cite them under 618? Why do we have to have, in addition to that, a nuisance ordinance?
So the trouble lies when there is the extent of probable cause, which would be to find somebody guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, I pull up and I know that, I'm just gonna give you an example on Brandywine so that it's easy to be clear. I pull up and I know that I hear that music coming from those 2 or 3 houses on Brandywine that I've already been to before. But as I pull my cruiser around to be able to take enforcement action, I don't know who it is or which house that is, you know, out of those 3, but all 3 of them are part of this big party that are there. So I can then say, I've now warned all 3 of them on nuisance abatement and keep track of that. But I didn't have enough to make an arrest, or didn't have enough to actually cite someone, because I wouldn't feel confident that I had chosen the right, which house that was. Or, you know, if it's when we're stretching you know, I have to witness someone's disorderly conduct. And I get there and I can hear the screaming, but I don't know which one of these, you know, 2 residents in the same house I should be citing for that disorderly conduct when they're standing on the front porch swearing. I could hear them, but I don't know which one it was. So I don't have enough that rises to the occasion of probable cause for beyond reasonable doubt, but I can warn them on nuisance abatement to keep track of that. So then that hopefully will hone their behavior, where I didn't have enough to actually arrest them, if that makes sense. Is that explaining to you? Okay.
Who gets the nuisance, the property owner of the rental or the occupant of the
Well,
rental?
both of them would be giving copies of the information, but the landlord would have to hold them accountable. So he would be, if it's, and the owner occupant, if that's the person, if it's not, it's the landlord who's then going to get a copy of it and say, their tenants and their guests, or possibly their guests, are causing the disturbance over and over again. And then they have to do something to remedy it.
And we would put together all the logs, all the calls for service there, and if this landlord that says, hey, I get my money every month, I don't give a damn what they do, no, you need to, because your neighbors are being affected by this, gives us some juice.
Well, I didn't read this. It's twice. All you have to do is have 2 calls.
So it has to be 2, then it has to go in front of the chief. So it's not, it wouldn't be that, you know, afternoon shift has been there twice, and so I'm going to send them a letter. I actually have to put a packet together for the chief, so by technicality it's 2, but it's going to have to be far more invasive than that.
Okay, so let's take this for example. Let's say Greenbrier, where Councilman Stivoli lives. Nice neighborhood. A family moves in, they've got a daughter with a mental health problem that just is got a problem, and she causes a problem in the neighborhood.
That's,
That's what this is saying.
Right.
I'm 100% against anything like this. I think it tramples on people's rights. I think that not everybody's perfect, and we're
There's
gonna,
a big difference though between causing a noise disturbance because they're having a party and not caring about their neighbors, rather than having a child who has an issue, and that would never be on the chief's desk and him say that's okay.
but the
Yeah.
neighbors will say that. The neighbors will say, you have a nuisance ordinance, and I have no compassion for that girl that lives next door to me, and she screams in the middle of the night, and so how can you distinguish the two? I see you took out, because there were problems, I've seen this sort of ordinance before, and I've always been against anything that we charge people for our services to come out.
You've seen other cities' ordinances?
No, I've seen in the news where cities were sued. You weren't allowed to do that because domestic violence victims did not call. And it's just wrong. I just feel it's wrong. And you don't know what tomorrow's gonna bring, and as I said, maybe his neighbor is a true nuisance in the city.
I don't see how that example fits this in any way. What I'm referring to is a business across from Incarnate Word that's doing illegal sex acts, and we can't make a criminal case, but we have 100 logs there, 100 logs, not 2, 100. That's what this is to me. This is egregious, over the top, but we can't take some type of criminal action. We have a drug house on your street, and there's a problem, and we get a number of calls for service, but don't ultimately obtain a search warrant. This is what that's about. Getting that landlord involved, the tenant, both of them being served, cleaning up the neighborhood. That's how I look at this guy.
And I'm more than happy to have a discussion with any resident who would come to me and say, you have a nuisance abatement law, and this girl is, but this girl has a mental health issue, and they're doing everything they can for her. I have absolutely no problem, and I know the chief does, has no problem with telling them, absolutely not, that's not what the intent of this ordinance is, and we won't use it that way.
I don't think we should ever charge for a police call, ever, ever, ever. I think that's what taxes are for. That's, if you pick up and call 911, you should get a response.
I agree with you, but I also believe that the people who live around you are also entitled to have and live in a neighborhood that is free from all of the extra possibilities of crime that we can't necessarily prosecute. So, and the examples that the chief said are primary examples for those things.
Do we have that big of a problem? I mean, do we have that big of a problem that we absolutely need this ordinance, that we have hundreds of calls on a business that we can't do anything with?
We have history at businesses, but like I said, now, I can't point to a specific issue other than, I would say, Brandywine, where you have rentals. And we do have our issues from time to time. And we did last summer. Again, we had that resident on Tobek who strongly supports this, would be willing to write a letter for this anyway to help her, because she has already said, when I have company over and we're in the backyard, I'm embarrassed. I live in Parma Heights, and I'm embarrassed that I have to deal with this. And that's where this comes in to help us, help her. That's the point of this. And yeah, I do have all the logs, and, it's not 2 in that example you gave. That's not what, that doesn't fit this.
But
This folder's dedicated to Brandon.
It's what could happen.
If
Chief-
We have an ordinance like this. So what do you do if, let's use an example that a resident has, an addict, with a substance abuse problem, living in their home. So if they cause a problem, and if they rent, they're gonna be treated differently if they live in Brandywine, or are they gonna be treated differently if they live on Blossom and they own their own home?
Explain the problems they're causing.
I wouldn't know, okay, I'm using that as an example. They come home, or even an unruly teen, 2 o'clock in the morning, the radio's blasted in the car for an hour, and it wakes up the neighborhood, and the kid won't listen. And you get 3 phone calls on that. How do you deal with that Is it different because it's on Blossom and I own my own home, or somebody that lives on Brandywine? And I'm being devil's advocate here. I really am. I'm not.
Chief,
Homeowners could as well be charged. If you own the home and there's an issue.
And so where do you draw the line?
I don't try to make this out to be Brandywine where there are rentals, but that is where we have pockets of issues, because then you have tenants who don't own the home and have less respect. That's the point I was trying to make. But could this apply to anyone in the city? Absolutely.
Right, and that's my point. I don't think we should have something that's so all-encompassing for the entire city where community grows. And because you don't have the money and you're living in a rental and you drive an old car and it's like you don't have the rights.
I don't think that has anything to do with criminal behavior or being a nuisance. The fact that you don't have money or you're down and out.
But you can own your own home and still have a nuisance with someone.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
So I don't believe that
It's
that
the same as
person.
the building department for not giving up your property. If we have a standard of living within the city. If you're a renter and you're down and out and money-wise, and you're saying that as long as you're leading your own life and not coming home and, blaring, music that's offensive to the world, to their neighbors to F off, if that, they should be held accountable for that, don't you agree?
I don't think with a fine that they're not criminally charged and they have a fine for officers coming out there. I don't believe that they should be, no. I honestly don't.
Then what would be the solution to you, for the residents we have to answer to, that are calling to complain, that have issues?
We have good ordinances. We have good ordinances. Cite them for noise ordinances. Cite them for what's on drug abuse, disturbance of peace. And the disturbance of peace encompasses so many things.
But it also has to be witnessed by an officer. I can't just show up and know that there's noise in their backyard. I have to know who it was who turned it on and who's responsible for it. And no one's gonna take that blame.
Well, I'm sure if you're out there five days a week, somebody's gonna turn it off. Eventually.
This packet tells me that that's not true. This is just those houses. So using that as an example, that there is no responsibility taken by any person in those residences. And it is a constant battle.
And no one has contacted the homeowner, the rental owner.
Sure, I've contacted them, and they've evicted one of the two parties that are there, and with issues. But the problem is they don't have the teeth, I guess, to back that up by saying, listen, I'm being cited for you, and within their own lease agreement, it says if the city cites them for something, then they can then take it out and evict their residents.
So we work with the city on who owns these residences, and certainly we get cooperation at times. Hey, I don't want these tenants in there that are causing problems. Many of them don't live in the city, make premise checks every now and then, and things are fine. But then when we bring it to their attention, we get cooperation. But we don't, as I pointed to earlier, all the time. Hey, I'm getting my rent, I'm good. Well, now we have this in place to say, hey, there's a little bit of pressure here. We're gonna show you these laws. We're here often. There is a problem with your tenant. That's the point. And again, that example you gave earlier doesn't apply.
Well, I don't know, Mr. McCorney would have to say if that applies or not. I mean, if it's a nuisance, whether you're sympathetic towards something or not, it's still a nuisance, right?
I'm relying on the information that was brought by the police department, and it's up to the council to make the decision if you want to endorse this ordinance or not. It's been reviewed also by our city prosecutor, who actually, we had a little bit of a discussion about it today. He sees that it's proper and it's enforceable in the event we need to enforce it in mayor's court or anyplace else. So I'm going to back the police department.
We brought it up in '09 for specific examples, and the time to bring it in isn't when you truly need it. We did need it several years ago. I can point to a drug house. I'm drinking, and I I remember it clearly. Unfortunately, we were able to successfully right that situation. But it would have certainly been nice to have this in place. That's the point.
And the intent of this is good. I understand that. I just don't think it's going to serve our residents well.
Can I make a quick comment, Councilwoman? I want to emphasize, I've heard a couple of times you keep referring to rental, but this does not have to deal just with rental. It's residents as well as commercial. And I also heard you talk about playing the devil's advocate. Well, let me play the devil's advocate. What do you say to the neighbor that's put up with either the loud noise or any of the other examples that you've used? Our police department responds repeatedly. They have nothing that they can do. How do you tell that neighbor that's making those phone calls, continue to make those calls, we document it, but there's nothing that we can do about it? And we repeatedly are using excess hours at this residence.
I don't understand why we can't just cite all three houses. If it's coming from one of them, cite them all three, let the judge figure it out.
Because the judge isn't supposed to figure it out, we are, before we cite them. So I have to have probable cause, which would be me swearing in front of a judge. I know for certain that the person I'm charging is the one who is responsible for this noise. And I cannot do that, but I do know that I still have miserable residents.
But can a resident, we used to, and this is in the past, I know with like dogs at large, we have a resident come in and sign the affidavit that I know this cat lives at X, on Blossom Avenue, and it's been in my yard numerous times, and they would sign the affidavit.
When the victim is society, I can't have a resident sign as the swearing party. It has to be an officer. So as in a disturbing the peace situation, I would have to be witness to it. And otherwise, I couldn't have Kathy Walsh as the victim of that. If it's an assault, absolutely. If it's a menacing, absolutely. But for loud noise, it's a society is the victim. And that's how it's listed, honestly.
And I can tell you that who we're dealing with now on Tobic with this latest issue would fear retaliation. I think that's something that we need to step up with. So to answer your question, I don't think she would be comfortable with that.
Right. I just think it's too broad. And I would really like to know, I know there were cases in the last couple of years where other cities have these types of ordinance on the books, and they have serious legal problems with them.
The serious legal issues that you're referring to are because of the victims from domestic violence. So Cleveland State University's graduate program actually did a research study on this particular ordinance and what was wrong or why it would be ever looked at unfavorably or could cause issues. And it was specific to the victims of domestic violence, which is one of the reasons it was removed. And it makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
I think to jump to this, it first comes to me. So to ask Director Pacorni, it comes to me first. In that example, you gave 2 calls. That's nowhere near where this fits in, nowhere near. And certainly there would be plenty of conversations between Director Pacorni, Prosecutor Schneider, the mayor. I mean, this is something that is a bit above. It's above. I mean, I'm not going to jump to charging someone with this. It's just something nice to have on the books with these repeated issues. I can't stress that.
Do you have access to that study?
Sure.
Can you send it to me just via email? Fine. I'd like to.
Be happy to.
Okay.
Yeah, we did our homework with this. We certainly didn't want to affect domestic violence victims. That was very important. I think a lot of these cities, it's been a good tool for them. As you heard, many cities have this in place. I don't know if very few that don't.
And Councilwoman Walsh, you could help me out. Maybe you could forward to me the cities that have had allegations made against them or that they were sued for this?
That would be in what?
Well, you said you've read numerous cities, so if you could forward that information to my office, I would appreciate that.
All right, and I'm sure it's contained in that study, because it was a...
Wherever you read it, I would appreciate if you would forward to me what you're referring to.
Okay.
Councilwoman Walsh, there are several council members that want to comment as well, so if it's okay. No, that's fine. Councilwoman Danzak?
Yes, I for one would like to see this nuisance ordinance enacted. That is my ward that we're talking about, Brandywine and Tobic, and I've had in the past couple years, many complaints, and usually by the same neighbor who abuts all these houses with problems. And we're 2 streets away where I live, and the fireworks are constant also. And I know that's my thing, so if this helps you to help the residents that want to live in peace, then God bless you, that's good, we need that.
The fireworks are an issue there, no
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Councilman Stavoli?
I did have one question. You had mentioned that this is written so that there is no hindrance to people that are calling about domestic violence. That's correct?
Correct. It
So-
specifically says in there.
So they are protected,
That's correct.
100%.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I just wanted to verify that. Thank
So
you.
we can't ever have someone.
I don't want anything in there, right.
That's the case, and this be held against them, not.
Right.
No, if there is even a question where we show up, it was initially a noise disturbance complaint, and it's found to be a domestic disturbance complaint, it would not be.
It doesn't follow the same guidelines? Okay, all right. Thank you.
Councilman Rounds, did you have a comment?
A couple questions, actually. So this isn't really in place for like your first-time roll-ups to a house. This is we've been here, and we need another tool to kind of get your attention that we need to fix this, if I'm understanding, okay? Roundabout, what would the cost be for like one nuisance ordinance citation? Are we talking $100? Are we talking $400? I mean, what round ballpark?
No, well, so it was the standard 2 officers, minimum 2 hours. Right, that was the minimum amount, so about $100.
About $100. Okay, and so for some people, that might be enough of an incentive to address the problem so I don't have to pay that kind of a fine, or is that the right word,
We're
penalty?
hoping so.
We're
Okay.
hoping so.
Yes.
Right. Is there any possibility of looking into not just a financial citation, but possibly some kind of a diversion program where maybe they could work off the $100 if that's an issue for any residents who can't or don't want to pay the $100? Maybe they're washing police cars for 10 hours or pulling weeds or, whatever. I mean, just something to think about.
Well, I do believe that would be an option for the zoning board,
Mhm.
to put that in front of someone who's appealing and knowing that they have a fine against them. I would believe that they have that authority because they're the ultimate top line.
And
If
that's-
there's a hardship, we're always willing to work with Prosecutor Schneider, Magistrate Longjack.
Okay.
And we do, more so with juveniles, but we do have that option as well. What I would love to see is we sit down with someone and say, hey, here are the laws, and you get compliance, and that
Right.
that would be great. We can try to cite
Right.
another step, but we just want to remedy the situation for our residents that are having issues.
Sure.
That's the goal.
Absolutely. And so then just talk me through the process of this zoning appeal. What would that look like? The resident disagrees with the citation, they
First
take it?
appeal to the chief, so the chief would meet with them.
Okay.
So, and a lot of that could possibly be worked out then, depending on what the situation is.
Mhm.
And then if they did not agree with his take on the situation and that he was continuing with the fine against them, then they put in a written request to see the zoning board to appeal the case. So they,
And that's for the other side that feels this is unfair. There's recourse. So there's several avenues.
and it's a separate entity than the police department, so it works out better. And it, as Director Corney said, that's because they're residents, it has something to do with where they're living. So, they have an appeal right then, if there's some significant reason for what has gone on and, or continues to, then that's where they would step up and say so between going to the chief and, the zoning board.
And then one final question. The person that's called in the complaint is never identified to the person you're citing.
So that's a kind of a tricky situation. So to address that easily, if I called today and I wanted to complain about town rounds, I give my information to dispatch as public record. If I request to remain anonymous, then my name is not on that information. So then the other party doesn't know. I can tell you that in Ms. Danzig's complaints that the person who's calling often, half of them have her name on, half of them don't. And I've met with her personally before, trying to remedy the situation. We've tried numbers of things for her. So, so somebody could find out is what I'm saying if they didn't say they wanted to remain anonymous when they call.
Not that I'm calling anybody, but I just wonder. Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks.
Councilman Haas?
Yeah, mine's actually just a comment, and I would just like to applaud all of you for the hard work that you've done on this. Having lived in the city for 52 years and experienced what you're talking about in various different situations over the years, I think it's something we need very much. And I'm grateful for all the effort and research that you've put into this, because it's comprehensive, and I think it's something we need.
And Councilman Stavoli?
I'm sorry, I just have one more question. It piggybacks off of Councilman Round's questions. The rates for fines for businesses, are those the same? And I don't see that here, and I apologize if it's here.
We just went down one standard fine.
One standard, so a business would be fined the same amount as a resident?
Well, that doesn't necessarily hold true. So if it's, let's say there is a continuous issues with fights on the weekends.
Okay.
In the business.
Okay.
And that's what we're going back and forth over repeatedly. There's not just two officers who are responding to a fight, that'd be four. So now
I
we're
see.
doubling that.
I see.
So, and
Okay.
how long did it take for us to be there to deal with that situation, that they should have known, you know, maybe they should have less people inside the bar, or, you know, this was something they should have had, paid their own security for. So those types of situations could be more, and it depends on how involved it is.
Good example, thank you.
Good discussion. Anything else for the chief or Sergeant Zach? All right, Chief, thank you. Sergeant, thank you. Miranda, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
With that, we're going to move on to item number 3. Item number 3 has to do with the police contract. As of this afternoon, Safety Director Burns is in conversation with the police union. There's a little bit of tweaking that needs to be done to some of the language. So he has asked me to pull that back as soon as they get the police to sign off with the change in the language. We'll bring it to you. So item number 3 will be removed this evening. We will move on to item number 4. Well, 4, 5, and 6, you're going to see Engineer Bender. The first one he's going to address is the resurfacing project for the Queens Highway and Layer Drive. Hello, Dan, wherever you want to address. You want to sit here?
No, you're fine.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Everyone for 4, 5, and 6. Item number 4 was the resurfacing project, Queens Highway and Layer Drive. We have 2 legislations there. The first one is legislation authorizing FedEx to prepare plans, specifications, and estimate for resurfacing Queens Highway and Layer Drive. And then the companion legislation with that is authorizing service directors to go out to bid for resurfacing Queens Highway and Layer Drive. So we are asking council for consideration, suspending the rules so we can move forward with the project.
That's on, I'm sorry, Mr. Bender, that's on one reading? You're requesting suspension?
For both.
For first reading?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to, for.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Items 5 and 6 are kind of the same project. Item 5, water main replacement for Queens Highway and Layer Drive. The first piece of legislation is authorizing the FedEx to prepare plans, specifications, and estimate for water main renewal projects along Queens Highway, Layer Drive, and Northern A Drive. Companion legislation with that is authorizing service directors to go out to bid for the water main replacement along Queens Highway and Layer Drive. And then the third piece of legislation is authorizing service director to go out to bid for water main replacement along Notre Dame nation. We're asking council for consideration of suspending the rules so we can move forward with the project. So we go ahead with the one to be.
Does council have any questions or comments for our engineer? Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bender. I would like to add an item. Our finance director, Kay Caucus, will be in at the next mayor's caucus to be more specific, but she wants to give you a heads up regarding the tax budget. Katie?
Just a couple things, because I do have a Zoom. In your email, you'll have the financials. So any questions about that, please let me know. Everything is really good on pace. Overtime below where it would be pacing for about a third of the year. And then also, in case we do not have special meetings over the summer break, I would like to put the tax budget on for passage at the next meeting. We could go over it during caucus, and then I would ask for passing on one reading. It's a housekeeping matter that we sent to the county, just telling them that the property taxes we charge are supported, that we do need those funds.
Questions for our finance director? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Katie.
Katie.
I have nothing else on the agenda, Madam President.
Thank you, Mayor.